Slash gas station, that's Andes. I treat my sauce like my Kool-Aid, so don't touch it, please. And load the free load, can't stay away from me. So I'm so one up for the whole G. They carry out slash gas station, that's Andes. I treat my sauce like my Kool-Aid, so don't touch it, please. And load the free load, cats can stay away from me. And yeah, chicken with the mama sauce, fries with the mama sauce. They never use enough, I got a side of it. Tourists come through the hood sometimes when they get lost. People asking me, where I got this mama sauce. For the chicken with the mama sauce, fries with the mama sauce. They never use enough, I got a side of it. Tourists come through the hood sometimes when they get lost. People asking me, where I got this mama sauce.
Hello, welcome to Stories for Change, Food Edition, Episode 1. My name is Janelle Cooper. I'm an educator and special events coordinator at the Smithsonian's Anacostia Community Museum, and we are totally excited about tonight's event. I would like to welcome my wonderful colleague, Sage Morgan Hubbard. Sage is a mother, she's an artist, poet, educator, curator, engaged scholar, and organizer. She is on contract with the museum's education department, working on programming for our Food for the People exhibit. So I'm pleased to introduce you to Sage. Sage?
Hey, thank you so much, Janelle. And welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here. This is the year of food justice at the Anacostia Community Museum. And we decided that theme and exhibition calendar years ago, long before the pandemic, when equity, food, and food workers were shown to everyone as essential and on the front lines. Now, all people and cultures tell stories. Museum exhibitions are all about stories. How and what we eat, how we cook it, how we get our food has stories behind it, and telling the often untold stories from often unheard people can make a difference. This is one of the most universal forms of human communication and the most transformative and impactful. This is why we're delighted to introduce you tonight to our Stories for Change series, starting with this food edition, a series of 7 local homegrown storytellers, many of who this is their first time telling stories and connecting to our Food for the People, Eating and Activism in Greater Washington exhibition, now on view both inside and outside our exhibit. So we're going to share 2 fresh new stories and storytellers with you tonight, and you can hear from directly. We're going to interview afterwards as they talk about why food matters to them. Our theme for tonight is the people behind the plate, from farm to table, based on the section of the exhibition with the same name. Do you know that 8% of DC workers and 9% of Maryland and Virginia workers are employed in restaurant and food service jobs? When you come to the exhibition, you can learn more of these statistics, discussions of all the historical background from sharecropping and farm and service industry labor battles, the discussion of mumbo sauce, like the song we just heard, and how the government affects what we eat and the everyday people who grow, process, and serve the food that we eat. You'll walk away learning about everything up to the most recent access to food protests and living wage campaigns today that the larger DC area food industry is really interconnected to the tales that we share. But we're starting with this really micro level with personal people's true stories. We're actually recording tonight as a podcast so we can share this with more people around the world. So without further ado, I don't want to talk. It's not about me, right? It's really about our storytellers. So I'm really excited to introduce Sara Hernandez, and she is a stand-up comic, a storyteller, a singer, songwriter, and an actress from the DMV. She's performed for the Smithsonian, the Kennedy Center, Woolly Mammoth Theater, Anacostia Playhouse, Union Stage, Busboys and Poets, The Comedy Loft, and many more. Her satire and comic sensibility has garnered by Broadway world. When she's not performing, you will find her creatively expressing the peaks and valleys of her moods on Instagram or TikTok under the handle hypofeminine. Flamboyance is not sold separately. So we're going to play her clip and then we're going to have a quick chat with her.
So, in El Salvador, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. She cared for my sister with a tight-knit family supporting her. Her favorite thing to do was to theatrically tell stories and jokes at family gatherings. She killed everybody in the room. Tears of laughter, siblings, adults short of breath, cousins asking her to stop, but not stop. No, she had the gift of being able to gather her loved ones in one space and fill them with warmth through collective laughter. On one trip to DC that she made with my sister, she saw how there were more opportunities than in El Salvador, so she chose to stay. And I was born, and she had all kinds of jobs: babysitting, retail, cleaning. And she did all of this so that we didn't ever have to work those types of jobs and be whatever we wanted. I decided to be an artist. And that meant I ended up doing the same kind of work as my mom. Service. Now, one summer, I worked as a busser for a brand new beer hall in the city. It was so shiny and new. Yeah, it was so fancy, but it had like the rustic walls that were painted on. It was in one of those industrial type of buildings that was clean for the clientele, but secretly still dirty. A place where in the evenings you could host a retirement home activity like trivia night, bingo, watercolor paintings, if you will. And then you could charge $40 for the event if you pair it with unlimited alcohol. That's it. No, but on late weekend nights, it was for Chad, Brad, Brian, and Cameron and their belligerent quest for fireballs. If you don't know what fireballs are, bless your heart. Yeah, no, every weekend night we were packed to capacity. This building held up to 230 patrons. On staff, we had 5 bartenders, a full, large kitchen staff, and only 2 bussers. Yeah, on one weekend, I could nearly support myself. I had to sell my soul to Satan, but it turns out that pays the bills. No, you're no longer considered human when you have to clean up after people. No, as a busser, you are an invisible, weightlifting, juggler, contortionist, magician that has to remove dishes, glasses, trays, napkins, cutlery, shine tables, sweep floors, barely noticed with the swiftness of a NASCAR team. Except for you're the only team member. And it's Saturday with Chad, Brad, Brian, and Cammie. The only times I wasn't invisible meant either getting hit on by these men or my coworkers. No, places like these were built with the intent to make this city cleaner and more beautiful. But to me, it was already beautiful because of communities my mother cooked her way into. You see, she learned how to make Salvadoran dishes here. And our home became a hub for her girlfriends, other invisible ladies, babysitters, cleaners, retail workers, med techs. They would all gather at our house and with their kids. And the main event was to sit down, taste home, and speak it. Spanish was as fluid in the air as laughter from my mother's jokes and the aroma of warm tortillas. I didn't realize how luxurious a sanctuary like this was until I had a job where the running joke amongst the employees was, "Oh my gosh, you think we'll get to eat today?" Where 14-hour shifts were comprised of cleaning after drunk adults playing Giant Jenga, Uno, or Connect Four, kind of like how my mom had to with her boss's kids. Yes, no, the rowdiness occurred with broken stein glasses, beer, and bar fights, and spoiled attitudes shoved with sticky trays and contempt. The nocturnal life was very difficult for me to create a community the way that my mother did. Now, my off time it looked more like a silent, dark bedroom with like my hot tea and the blue light of my phone. I eventually had to leave. I could no longer tolerate my managers taking advantage of me. But it's so interesting because these places, these jobs, these grueling yet essential jobs still exist to make this city apparently cleaner and more beautiful for some people. But I assure you that the beauty actually lies with sanctuaries that you create for yourself. But thank you.
Yes. Give it up for Sara. That was so beautiful. So we're here with Sara, and I'd love to just thank you for that wonderful and hilarious, heartfelt story that speaks to the invisibility of food workers. I know that you've done lots of comedy work in the past, but this is one of your first times like doing this kind of storytelling, and I would love to know how it felt to talk about these personal stories of your family, especially your mother, who you said cooked her way into these communities.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. So I'm a very transparent person. And quite frankly, my relationship with my mother is pretty tumultuous. And I talk about it a bit more in comedy. Like it's complicated. However, like for me, I've always, I don't know, I think forgiveness is very important. And the way that I do that is through empathy. And I wanted, just because our relationship and our bond is complicated, that doesn't take away her bravery. And the things that she did that are admirable, and the ways that I am so similar to her in strange ways growing up with her. I joke about it in comedy. It was a bit more stoic and our relationship, but when we went to El Salvador, that's when I discovered she was this big person. And I'm like, how are we both like this? So and so I through storytelling, I gained more empathy. I wanted to build more empathy.
Yeah, I really loved how you talked about the reality that many artists have to work in the food industry as well as immigrants. And what are generally the relationships in the back of house like between these two communities? And you're someone who is part of both of them simultaneously. Did you ever translate between the two and do like some code switching and
Absolutely, definitely. What's great is that you can listen to both musics. There's like Selena playing in the back, and then there's like, I don't know, Usher playing up front. Is the first thing that came to mind. But yeah, I think it's tense though. I think because I think a lot of undocumented people are still taken advantage of, paid a little bit less, and so there's like tension between like, even if you are, say, someone like me who grew up working class, you're still paid a higher hourly wage for the most part. And front of house people tend to get tips. There's always tension. So it's complicated. I think, and there's even people like me, grew up working class, will take advantage of people too. You know what I mean? Take advantage of the labor and the hard work. I mean, that's my true answer.
yeah. No, I really love how you get to the truth of some of these hard truths, and that even when you're speaking about Chad, Brad, Brian, and Cameron, like kind of the white male drinking scene with all the fireballs and selling your soul to Satan to pay the bills, that you said the only time that you were not invisible is when you were being hit on and sexualized. Could you talk more about, I mean, you spoke a little bit about the racial dynamics, but maybe some of these gender dynamics in the food industry? And have you experienced racism or sexism or harassment on the job? And how do you survive these interactions? And maybe like, are there any tools that you have for others? I know that's a pretty loaded question, but in
It is.
community, I think it's important.
For sure. And I do, for anybody watching, I do want to answer this question because the way that I answer this question is actually parallel to, um, dealing with that situation, which is know yourself and know your limitations and your feelings. Because if for anybody else who might be a bit more sensitive, like answering that question might be a bit strong and like a trigger point. For me, I have had the luxury of therapy since I was 16, Medicaid therapy, shout out. um, and so so for me, I think that I have learned to you know, cope and process things with a lot of tools. So therapy and just like paying attention to yourself, because that's also what therapy teaches you, is to see how things feel for you. So I think the more you know what things make you uncomfortable, the more that you'll be able to handle those spaces and prioritizing. Are you going to stick it out for the money? Like, what are your goals with that money? And just trying to think ahead, because there's no really way around it sometimes. And so that's why you need to take care of yourself. And you do develop a thick skin. Like that is promised.
That's great. I also love the way that you were talking about these Salvadoran women communities that were so invisibilized or are so invisibilized, but that cooked their way. It kind of felt like a cooking support system and therapeutic kind of space too. And that when you said that your mom actually learned how to cook here in the US, and was supported by these women in kind of the underground and vendor communities where they, I think your quote was sit down, taste home, and speak it. Could you
Yeah.
talk more about your experience like growing up with these communities and how
Yeah.
they, yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know of like a huge underground community. If there is, man, that'd be really cool. Just like, but like the community that I was exposed to was like really just what my mom kind of cultivated, because she was the only one in her immediate family that moved here. Same with my father. I mean, other like first generation American kids, like their families all came here, and like one family member sponsored another, and they grew up in big boisterous families. My mother was all by herself. So her community she built through other babysitters that she would meet at the park, the parents of other people. So I personally grew up with a lot of surrogate families, a lot of, people who were in my life for short periods of time. And, you know, I think that's why I found why I find my mother incredible in that way is that it really was an exclusive thing that she kind of cultivated herself and with a lot of people. So
Yeah. And then in terms of your communities, it said that you also talked about having these long 14-hour shifts where you barely got to eat. And it's crazy to think that food workers don't get to eat, but I think that's a reality that you're sharing, and a nocturnal life. And maybe could you also speak more to how the evening shifts and working at nights changed your life and how it's different for those of us who might work during the daytime?
for sure, your circadian rhythm is just messed up. I mean, but like, and your sleeping regimen is off and on in all kinds of ways. Um, but yeah, I think just Anthony Bourdain talked about it a lot in his work. It was just I think because it attracts a lot of the money is good in the service industry. That's why a lot of people, especially you find in DC, you could graduate from like GW and be a waiter and still make a decent amount of money. Like you find a lot of people in this particular area where it's more common for anybody to have it who doesn't want to work a nonprofit or a 9 to 5. So, or, you know, so I guess for me, it was just, the alternative was working an office job, which I can't stand. And I feel like a lot of people who work those 14-hour shifts, it's hard and intensive, but the alternative is just not going to cut it. So it's like there's this weird love-hate relationship that you do build, in that I love this because even though it's draining, it's I get to work my whole body, and I get to connect with people, and I get to be surrounded by good food and make connections. It's complicated, it's hard, it's intense. There are some benefits.
A lot of stories as well.
Oh,
I would love to hear like what some of your favorite places to eat in the DC area are, whether it's restaurants or different like vendors on different corners or grocery stores that you go to.
yeah, so Aracelia's is like, for me, the best Salvadoran restaurant in this city. It's like spelled, it starts with an E. Like if you just Google Salvadoran restaurant, Columbia Heights, it'll be like the first thing that pops up, and it's been around for forever. So I'm gonna put that for number one. And then Habesha is an Ethiopian restaurant on U Street, but it's also a little market. Demi can correct me if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And Pho 14 is a great vegetarian, I'm vegetarian, pho spot as well. And what else? New Vegan, support Black owned and run businesses. And then Buffalo and Bergen in Union Market has a heart, like has a place in my heart. And Makan is a new Malaysian restaurant that's also in Columbia Heights that I highly recommend.
After working in the industry, do you tip differently or talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not tipping any less than 20%. And if I don't have 20%, I'm not eating out, because you're not making a high hourly rate wage. So, oh yeah.
Is there anything else that you weren't able to include in this story that you'd like to add? And if there's any way that, I know we shared your Instagram handle, but we'd love to hear it again, and any ways that we can check out more of your work.
Yeah, sure. So I do a lot of little things. You can follow me on Instagram. It's hypofeminine. So it's HYPO feminine. And so I post a few like weird videos there from time to time, but I also do music, lots of things in the works. Yeah. Nothing else really. And as far as the story goes, you could just follow my page and get to know me, But
thank you so much, Sara. We'll hear much more from you soon. Great. So we're going to keep the energy going, and we're also very excited to be working with Demi Mohammed. And Demi is an incredible, amazing artist. She's a performer, but this is the first time that she's written and performed this story. She's a DC native that spent her time in kitchens run by her mom and liquor stores run by her dad. Food's always been a large part of her life and something that drives her travel and jogs her memories. You can follow her on Instagram at Demi Mohammed. I will put that in the chat, where she frequently posts stories and posts of the food and drink that she tries around the city and around the world. So we're going to share her story first, and then we'll have some more chat with her. You don't want to miss this.
My name is Demi, like demigod, demi-tasse, demi-Asiago bagel, as a friend used to call me. I have a number of examples of how to help others hear my name correctly, as most people hear Debbie upon first meeting. And I think it's appropriate that I use the food-like examples tonight as we talk about food, since I am a foodie. And I think it's natural that I'm a foodie, as my mom's a chef and my dad's a wine connoisseur. I know, it's pretty dope. And I pride myself on a list of foods that I've eaten that some people might not want to try. I've had frog legs, grasshopper taco, lamb brain, cow tongue. I had cow tongue at a restaurant called Zengo, and it was my absolutely favorite restaurant in my early 20s. It took the cuisine of an Asian country and the cuisine of a Latin American country and combined the two, and then would change the pairing every 3 months. But not only did Zengo have a really cool concept, they also had the coolest bathrooms. Now, I love food, and I have since I was a child. But when I was younger, I tended to judge a restaurant not really based on the food, but based on the bathroom. And a good bathroom needs 4 things: good lighting, a clean floor, can't have toilet paper and paper towels everywhere, no water around the sink, and good smelling soap. So Zengo's bathroom had all 4 of these things and a beaded curtain to enter. Now, when I was younger, no restaurant experience was complete without a trip to the bathroom. And as I made my way back to the table, I was always asked what my score was. I was usually generous, never giving too low or too high of a score out of 5. But as I've started to grow, and as I see the city grow around me, I don't really find myself going to the bathroom to score a restaurant. I've started to judge a restaurant based on the atmosphere. If when you walk in, it feels warm and inviting. I've started to judge restaurants based on how the staff interacts with each other and not just the patrons. And now that I'm a little older, I've started to judge restaurants based on their mixed drinks. When I was younger, I really wanted restaurateurs from New York and Toronto to come down to DC to make it a food city. And you really, really need to be careful what you wish for. So Zengo is no longer in DC. There's a different chain restaurant in its place with the Chinese name next to the English name on a building in what was once a bustling Chinatown. And it's crazy to look around and see how different the city is. I look at Union Market, and it's still thriving, but it's so different from how it used to feel and what it used to be. It used to feel like a sprawling maze of wonders, and now it feels like a very cramped area to bring your dog for happy hour. Union Market used to be where my mom would get fish and vegetables and spices for her recipes, both for us at home and for her kitchen. And now it's where I go to get brunch and cocktails and a cool record. And although I enjoy all of this, it sometimes doesn't always feel right. I stand on the place where wholesalers have gone, and in their place are a new hip coffee shop, an apothecary to sell you crystals, and a spin class in what used to be a parking lot. My dad still gets his favorite Italian sub from a small deli that has the largest collection of Italian wines in the city, but it's being overtowered by a high-rise apartment in the process of being built. There are buildings here that look industrial because they're wholesalers, and there are buildings that look industrial because it's the aesthetic. I look at another part of the city on 14th Street, where in the 90s, it was just a Fresh Fields, now known as Whole Foods, and a handful of other places that I had no interest in as a kid. And now there are more restaurants than I can count and more apartments that are more than I can afford. But even when I was younger, the city was changing around me without me realizing, as the Fresh Fields at the time was a turning point for 14th Street. Even farther back in the 70s, a young woman worked in a restaurant in DuPont and would go into the liquor store next door for cigarettes after her shift. Eventually, she started dating the store manager and moved into the small apartment above the shop. As I was driving down M Street recently, I realized that my parents' first apartment together is now a glass and vape shop. So my wish for DC to become a food city has definitely come true. There are so many amazing restaurants that have opened in the last decade and that have thrived and survived in the last year and a half. But even though it's all so shiny and new and I enjoy all of it, I still feel a large amount of guilt. I feel a sadness that I have access to so many grocery stores, but there's still food deserts in Wards 7 and 8. I feel a sadness that there are people who can't afford a Michelin-starred restaurant meal. And I feel a sadness that there are people who move in to this city with no regard for people who can no longer afford it. And I feel a sadness that I can no longer live in a blissful ignorance like so many others, because I have to acknowledge that I also contribute to this change. I choose where to eat based on write-ups and accolades. I choose where to live based on proximity to grocery stores and bars. And I can order delivery when I feel both too lazy to cook or walk down the street to pick something up. And I take up space that belonged to others before me. As one person, I cannot stop the change that is inevitable to come, but I can do my hardest to remember the old city, embrace the new, and figure out the best way to move forward for myself. I can still gift my dad a gift card for his favorite Italian sub, but then I can also treat him to Father's Day brunch at Navy Yard. There are so many amazing places that I have yet to try that I would never want to limit myself to just one place, like I overheard an older couple boasting about. And all the food was delicious at this restaurant. There are so many amazing places to still try. And I would love to acknowledge my privilege while also supporting as many of these local businesses as I can, especially those that are owned by women and immigrants and people of color. I want to share my experiences and the restaurants that I love, like the Me, with people who live here and people who are visiting so that they can also continue that support. I love living in an ever-changing city, but I don't love that not everyone can experience it in a positive way or at all. Using my old metrics, I would probably grade the city at a 4.5 for its clean floor, good lighting, and good smelling soap. But with my current metrics, I would probably rate the city as a 3. It no longer feels warm and inviting to everyone. I don't see people interacting with their neighbors like I think they should. And some parts of the city don't feel like they belong to everyone anymore. Thank you.
Ooh, thank you, thank you. Give it up for Demi. Wow, every time I hear it, I'm really taken by your story, especially as a fellow DC native, because I really relate to it. And I often get lost in the city these days because it's so different. And I can feel the sadness and duality of the food desert, and also at the same time being a food mecca, right? And it seems like you have lots of mixed emotions about gentrification, where you like some aspects and hate others. Could you talk more about that and how that's evolved even since telling the story?
Yeah, like I said, I need to acknowledge that I have this privilege, and I take up space and I take up opportunities that belong to other people. And in an ideal world, everyone is on equal footing, but you never want to push someone out of where they've been for 40 years. And a lot of people are moving out of the city because of different reasons, more likely recently because of people are staying at home and they're realizing that it's not as feasible for them to stay in the city if they can pay a cheaper mortgage somewhere. But DC has always had a pretty stable real estate market. And I'm trying to find a house now, and there's not a lot that you can really afford if you're not, making 6 figures for both people in the household. So those kinds of things where you're balancing, where you're like, yeah, there's really cool things to try. And there's so many amazing things coming into the city and so many different cuisines now, but you can't really afford to live here. So a lot of people are, living just outside of the city and then still coming in to experience those things.
Absolutely. And I think it's so amazing that you grew up with a mom who's a chef and your dad's a wine connoisseur. You spoke about some of the unusual foods you ate, but what were like typical meals like, or did you go out to eat a lot?
It was a good balance, I think. It was definitely something different every night. We had leftovers, but it wasn't really spaghetti all the time. And I don't know, it was pretty cool. My mom always says that she specifically learned how to cook because my grandmother couldn't. So she went to the Culinary Institute of America up in New York, and opened so many amazing hotels and restaurants and things in the area. She also grew up in Fairfax. So, we're driving around sometimes. She's like, that hotel, I opened that one. That McDonald's, I opened that one, like, but it's fun. It's always like special things for birthdays or Christmas. We never had turkey for Thanksgiving. We always had like flank steak.
That's great. Thinking about like the types of traditions that you're also multiracial and part of multiple communities that are very important to the DC area, just like Sara talked about the Salvadoran community, which is like really essential to DC. The Ethiopian community is such a mainstay. And can you talk about how you identify and how your racial and ethnic identity kind of connect to your foodie identity, or if they do?
Yeah. I'm blessed that my mom did learn a lot of Ethiopian cuisine and how to make that. I unfortunately have not learned that skill yet, and I have to get on that. But there's definitely, at least in my experience as a mixed child, there was a period of time where I sort of tried to stray away from my Blackness. And then I had to realize that the world sees me as a person of color, even if they don't see me as Black. A lot of people will be like, oh, you're Puerto Rican, oh, you're Dominican. And it's a compliment, it is. But, that sort of was like, no one ever sees you as half white or partially white, or, you're always going to be a person of color. And I had to, had that reckoning with myself. But in terms of my food, I don't really think I love so many cuisines. Korean food is definitely like a comfort food of mine. So if there is like one cuisine, I should say Ethiopian food, but it's definitely Korean food.
That's also, that's also part of the DC mix, right? And Fairfax County has, and that's part of what our exhibit talks about, is the large Korean community, and it's delicious. Talk more about your personal involvement in the food industry and what jobs you've had and worked in the industry. And have your parents kind of influenced that, or?
I don't know how it started. I never thought that I would be in the food industry. I went to school for music. And I wanted to open my own recording studio. And then when I graduated, I was like, don't really feel like practicing my piano every day anymore. So I got a job at Whole Foods in Annapolis, and I started as a cashier, and then I moved into the culinary center, which not every store has, but I did date nights, wine and cheese pairings, lots of kid classes every week. We had kids come in and I had to teach them how to safely make a snack. And then from there, I went to a grocery distribution center, and I don't feel like a lot of people realize how the groceries get onto the shelf, but I worked with, it was a distribution center in Bowie, and they distributed to a lot of large grocery stores in the area. It wasn't just in the area, we did, the mid-Atlantic. And it was really cool to see that process and how, all the way down to the grocery store level, there are people in the store who are always taking inventory and making sure there are no holes on the shelf, which was really cool. And my role there was in events. So we had yearly big trade shows. And I remember going to those trade shows with my mom as a kid, where we'd go to Ocean City or Baltimore or the big convention centers and walk the booths and the aisles and try all these different, kinds of food and olive oil and drinks and things like that. So it was cool to be on the other side of that and planning those things.
That's great. Were you also involved or listened in on some of the conversations of what food gets placed in which communities and that process?
A little bit. I remember that we once had Capital City Mumbo Sauce came to present. We had, a lot of, I don't know if I can like really say the names of the people, but there was a big chain that was here and local, and then there were chains that were more local in Ohio and Michigan. And so it was definitely different across those. And we had account executives, and one of my roles was to do a monthly meeting, and I would bring people in, those vendors who would present to the account executives, and each account executive, had a different store that they would go back and say, you know, I think this would do really, really well in this area or this store. We can start with 4 and see how it goes before we bring it into 20 or something like that. So I try to take a lot of pride in that and bring in more ethnic and, you know, different things, and definitely more local. Like Virginia Diner Peanuts was a big person in that, in our industry.
That's so great, because that leads me to my next question, is really thinking about how much you speak about the gentrification of the food scene and how we can counter that. And I think some of the things that we don't always think about is what gets sold in our supermarkets, and I know Whole Foods has a like local produced section, and they're really conscious of that, and we talk a lot in the exhibition about Capital City Mambo sauce, or Mambo, since there's even our titles are so political. But besides supporting small and people of color, like food establishments, what are some other things that we can do to kind of fight gentrification or be more aware of it? And are there particular places that you'd want to shout out or talk more about?
I'll start with the easier part of shouting out people. Definitely for me, I mean, Mama Jojo and that whole team is amazing. I'm #1 hype, I think, after Fabiola. Like, we are always there. My boyfriend and I went to 7 Reasons recently, and it's on 14th, just opened, delectable. The whole experience, from the waiters, the service, to the atmosphere, the food and drinks, was amazing. And I think I definitely have to shout out Little Food Studios up here in Petworth. I'm there probably at least once or twice a week. They make the best latte I've ever had in my life. They have great sandwiches. So if you're looking for, you know, something easy for lunch, I think the owner, Danielle, also does some catering. That's how she started. So she's continued to do that. So if you have a party, hit them up. But as for combating, I don't know. I mean, buy up the city back from the developers. I can't, you know, just sort of realize that, you know, you do have that ability to just be like, you know, I'm gonna go here tonight. And just have that in the back of your mind, sort of. Yeah, I don't know. That's such a tough question. But definitely, you know, if you want to work with, there's like Farm Fresh DC, I know, the farmers markets. There's a lot of community gardens in the city that I feel like people might not know about. So just getting that, there's a company that grows microgreens on top of high-rise buildings downtown. So like you can always find ways to help, even volunteer your time. And I think that would be something that would be really helpful.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And yeah, speaking to kind of like how you ended the story, I keep on coming back to that, is that you would have given DC a 4.5 for cleanliness and aesthetic, but your new rating system and metric would only give a 3. And because of the exclusion, how can we like make it a higher number? What do you think we need to do to be more inclusive as a city?
Yeah, cleanliness. I need, like, you know, it's a city, but just invite people to the table, maybe. You know, I think that I have a pretty diverse group of friends. We went to dinner last night and I was like, this is a pretty cool mix of people, you know, like just sort of getting out of your comfort zone, maybe trying a cuisine that you wouldn't normally try. That might be a good first step.
Yeah, that's great. And is there anything else that you wanted to include in your story that you weren't able to? And how can our listeners be in touch with you and check out more of your work?
Yeah, I don't think I had anything else to add. I think you know, it was my first story. I was very proud of it. I might do more. I don't know. I don't really, you know, perform anymore, but you can always follow me. My Instagram is Demi Mohammed, like the name game. And sometimes I'll post pictures about what I'm doing. I try to make TikToks about like day in the life in the city. So I think that's Demi Mo on TikTok. But if you want to find me, follow, yeah, I won't turn you away.
Thank you so much, Demi. And we actually have one more special treat. As you mentioned, the owner of Taimi and Tolimoli is Jocelyn Jojo La Yun, and she couldn't be here tonight, but she did tell us a story, and she's busy opening up her delicious restaurant. So if you're able to stick around for one more, we'd love to share Jojo's story with you right now. It's all about Burmese cultural influences and how her multi-ethnic identity is shown in her cooking and life philosophy that led her to be this, transformative chef and restaurateur. So thank you, Demi, for these suggestions of different food we can eat. And we're gonna, without further ado, we'll listen to Jojo's story.
My story will be short. So you know how people say to you, that food was made with love? Or I made this dish with love. I'm here to say that it may be a little bit more than that. I think personally, my love for food anyway, began before I was born, because I was born in Rangoon, Burma, and I was a huge 10-pound baby. Luckily, I don't have any memory of that. My food memories began when I was about 4. And that was just about the time when I was learning how to read and write. And it was getting abundantly clear that I was ambidextrous. My mother, instead of celebrating that I would be the 1% of the population, decided instead to tell me a story about a study. She told me about the study that claimed that if you allow a child to write and use both hands, he or she will develop a stutter. So she asked me to choose one dominant hand. Didn't matter whether it was left or right. So I chose my left hand. That only moved me up from 1% to 10% of the population, but she was pleased. And you know, when you're 4, that's all that matters. And after all, my mother, about a few days before the study magically appeared, had actually seen me on our pier on the river. And I was sitting on my haunches on the pier with my father. My father was a Sino-Burmese newspaper man, and he was rarely home during the day. Any kind of daylight time, you would not see him. But for some reason, that day, he had found a piece of a bamboo pole, and he had stuffed it with forbidden rice and a little bit of water, and he put it on an open fire, and we watched it, and when it was cooked, it was black. And my father took a machete out and he chopped it and he peeled it open and he showed it to me. And it was a cylinder of perfection to me. It was crispy on the outside and just perfect inside. And he showed me how to pick a little piece off and dip it in sesame salt. It was wonderful. So I just jumped in there with both my hands and I was grabbing and picking and eating. But at the corner of my eye, I can feel my Anglo-Burmese mother's disappointment in me. But I couldn't stop, so I just kept going. So then it was decided that it was time for me to learn about Burmese culture and food, because it was getting out of hand. So it started with a greeting. The way we greet each other is Tamisabi Bila, which is, have you eaten your rice? Rice gets equated with food. And so there it is, right? Not hi, how are you doing today? It's about the food. We want to know if you've eaten your food. Everything else comes after that question. So after learning that, I also had to learn the customs and the beliefs and the superstitions of this country. I'm very young, and I found them all very amusing, but I didn't dare to laugh at anything. And now, as an adult in Washington, D.C., I don't really have any space for those superstitions, but I'll share some of them with you. One is, don't ever touch anybody on their head, especially the elders. Don't ever point with your feet at anybody or anything. It's very disrespectful. Another one is, don't hang your clothes, women's clothes especially, over men's clothes, because they will lose their power. Another one is that you should never mix mangosteens with sugar, watermelon with eggs, rabbits with mushrooms, or you die. You should never bang your pots or stick your chopsticks in your bowl of rice, because your parents will fight and divorce. So these are the kinds of things that you get frightened by and grow up with. And this continued, this education about Burmese culture and food. And to add to it, I had a father who liked to eat funky, spicy, bold, crazy food with his fingers, and a mother who liked to eat with a fork in her left hand and a spoon in her right hand. And so now I have to learn, after all of this, I have to learn now, after we have all the superstitions and everything that people are telling you, you then have to learn how to eat the food. And the way you do it is you wash your hands and you go to the table quietly, and you don't pick your teeth or pick your nose. You do not cough or sneeze or hum or sing. If you have to do any of those things, you excuse yourself and you come back. And then the monks are fed. If there are no monks, the elders are fed. And then when it's your turn, you use your left hand and take a spoon, a serving spoon, and take a little bit of each of the items on the table that you like with a little bit of rice and put it on your plate. And then with your right hand, just using your fingers, you make a little bowl of rice and add any of those flavors that you like and put it to your mouth and eat it very carefully. And the test is for you, after your meal, to be able to take your palm like this and put it next to your cheek. And if your cheek is clean, you have succeeded. So this and everything else that gets jumbled into this whole bag of extremely exciting but confusing messages that I got. By the way, we also, to add to the mix, invited a lot of people from around the world to the dinner table. And they would bring all their crazy cultures and utensils and languages all to the table. And this all got mixed in me growing up and creating my own food map. So, 60 years on, I am a grandmother. I have 2 children, a son-in-law, 2 granddaughters. One of my daughters and I opened the only Burmese restaurant in Washington, D.C. Thank you. And now, when I come to you, whoever you are, and if I say, Taminsabi Bila, I am offering you all the sage wisdom of my parents, this history, all my travels, everything that I can conjure up from my left brain, my right brain, and everything else. And I think that maybe Adding all that together is a little bit more than love.
Yes. Oh, it's such a touching story. You can tell why we're so excited to be able to share Jojo with her elegant and confident storytelling that really is a mix of love and food is so much as what Sara and Demi have talked about. It's love, it's culture, it's what we do many times a day, and the way that Jojo talked about that ball of rice and the palm and all the ways that you make the food flavors connect. I really want to be there with her and in Burma. And I just love the food map mix of spices and food stories and education, and just even to know more about why can mangosteen combined make you die or have your parents divorce. So I hope that these stories today made you think about your own personal food memories and stories. If you have any food superstitions that you grew up with, and we hope that you are empowered and excited to tell your own stories, or maybe cook up some dishes of your own and create some new traditions. And this is not the only time that you will hear our food for change. Stories for Change Food Edition stories. We have 2 more sessions coming up on Wednesday, September 15th from 6:30 to 7:30, and on Wednesday, September 29th from 6:30 to 7:30. And you can register online at anacostia.si.edu/events. It's all free, just pre-registration is required. You can also sign up for our newsletter, and we are so excited to have you join us for many, many events for this Food for the People series. Yes, this was really wonderful. Please give it up for Demi Mohammed and Sara Hernandez and Jocelyn. Uh, Jocelyn Law Yon again, otherwise known as Jojo from Tiny Restaurant. So this is the end for tonight, but not the end for the series. Again, thank you again for joining us, and we can't wait to share more stories shortly. Please come back again and visit our exhibition right now, Food for the People. It's outside as well as inside our museum doors. All are welcome, and we're open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thank you. We'll hear from you soon. Have a great night, everyone.